just come up with one.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. I just got a text from Sarah. Traffic's stopped somewhere here. She's going to be a couple minutes late, so we're going to wait for her to get here.
Yeah, we don't have a quorum.
That has never happened
Yeah, rarely.
in my tenure.
It's unusual. There she is. Hey. Right on time, too.
Not bad. Perfect timing.
What do you need me to sign? Yeah, I'm not.
Kathleen? Kathleen? Ready? Yep. Good evening. The Board of Commissioners is the governing body of Clatsop County. All county service districts for which this body so acts, and as the Clatsop County Local Contract Review Board is now meeting in its regular session. Would you please join me for the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Nender?
Here?
Commissioner Clement? Commissioner Reed?
Here.
Commissioner Solis?
Here.
Commissioner Thompson?
Okay, we have a change to make to the agenda today. I would request that we, let's see, we're going to amend the agenda to add an item. It's going to be item 6C, cancellation of delinquent personal property manufactured structure taxes. So I would like to entertain a motion to approve the amended agenda as presented.
So move. Second.
We have a motion to second to approve the agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We have some comments from the public tonight. This is an opportunity for anyone to give a 3-minute presentation about any item on the agenda except public hearings or any topic of county concern that is not on the agenda. People wishing to speak during business from the public must fill out and sign a public comment signing card. We have a number of comments tonight, and we'll start out with our first guest, Josh Marquis. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you. My name is Joshua Marquis. I am the district attorney for Clatsop County and have been honored to so serve since 1994. And I'm coming before you as someone who for the first time in a quarter century is not running for re-election. So although this recommendation is certainly professional, it's also personal. As a citizen, I expect to, after I leave office in January of next year, continue to reside in the community and being at least as annoying as I am now, if not more so. But I'm not going to go on at length. I strongly urge you to recommend the jail proposal. It's not as big as I'd like it to be. It's, I think, 145 beds. But I would make these points. It's expandable. It's using, unlike the other two that I endorsed, and John Reichel, I see, is behind me there, and Sheriff Bergen, is using an existing facility. We're not asking the voters to build something from the ground up. We are getting help from the state. We're not exactly sure how much yet, but I know Senator Johnson's going to do what she can. We are also using, I think the county can say we've got skin in the game. We're going to be using special projects money, and I would urge you to actually consider doing that for several years, or at least a couple of years, because voters, I think, have to feel it. You know, it's going to be about $46 for a $200,000 assessed house. Steve Forrester was fond of saying that jails have no constituency, and I think he's largely correct in that. I care about the jail, Lieutenant Phillips cares about the jail, you care about the jail. But most people, unless they're in jail or they know someone who's going to jail, they probably don't care. If we care about mental health, we need jail because that's not where the mentally ill should be going. If we want alternative programs, we need a jail because that's the way they're enforced. 75% of all felons do not go to prison in Clatsop County, get on probation. Probation needs the jail to be able to do micro sanctions, mini sanctions, sanctions of any kind. So unless you have questions, I don't think there's other people that want to talk, and I don't want to burn through even my 3 minutes, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, our next guest today is Mr. George McCartan. Come on up. State your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. We've been down this road before, twice as a matter of fact, and the voters said no. We don't need a new jail. There are certainly arguments, as our outstanding district attorney stated, in favor of a bond issue for the jail. You have put out thousands of dollars for experts to go ahead and make recommendations as to reconverting the youth center. And there were two alternatives. One was for a larger and evidently with much automation, and for looking for a future expansion of a county that hasn't really expanded that much in the last 10 years. That was originally a 28 million, it would have been only 28,000. 28 million, and you asked for a review of that and brought it down to 24 million, where it stands now. But there's a lesser bond proposal of 12 million. And if we have to do this, I suggest to you that it might be a good idea to do the 12 million and see if it passes this time. You might have a little better chance. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next guest is John Reichel. John, come on up, state your name and address for the record. Hi.
Chair Lee, Commissioners, my name is John Reichel. I reside at 37102 Jurgensen Lane, rural Astoria. I also serve on your Rural Law Enforcement District Advisory Board. I would do anything I could to encourage you to refer this issue to the voters. I know it's a tough sell because jails are not sexy. They're not something you bring people into the county with and show off like you would a park or the Astor Column or anything else. But they are an essential necessity. And our jail has been the bottleneck for many years because it could not fully serve the law enforcement and justice community. Jails are kind of unique that they're primarily the responsibility of the county government, even though you have state police and 5 municipalities that arrest people, process people, and bring them into the jail. We went through this once before when we had the jail budget so decimated in the early 80s because of inflation and because of county's loss of finances, that the jail was crippled and was only serving 20 beds. As soon as the jail was reopened after an 88 bond issue, not a bond issue, after an 88 tax base, allowed us to reopen it to about 54 beds. The efficiency of all those other agencies, the courts, the district attorney's office, the efforts of prosecution was greatly enhanced because now you had sanctions again that you could use. But you still haven't ever been able to meet the demands that this area has. So for the security of your residents, for the properties, and for the welfare of the people, the jail is a necessary item. Maybe it's not popular, but it is necessary. Furthermore, you know, there's a social aspect to having a jail that can service all of the needs for sanctions. Currently, when you have somebody who's a minor offender, it's kind of like the broken window theory on a building. If you leave something unattended, and you'll have then more, it invites more broken windows and vandalism. The same happens in the human factor, where you have sanctions that go unanswered. And so you have a lot of people, jail, it's not the cure for everybody. Some people will get institutionalized, and they don't make, it doesn't make any difference what you do with them. But there's a lot of people that do not think jail is a great place to be. And if you can get somebody on a minor offense to be sanctioned, once or twice is usually all it takes, and then they start to change their behavior enough so that they don't want to be back in jail. On the present situation, when those minor sanctions cannot be issued and they go untouched or unsatisfied, and you get released, you don't go to jail, you don't have any sanctions other than maybe you build up a bunch of penalties and you end up owing to the system, then pretty soon the next thing that happens is that they escalate into more major crimes, and then all of a sudden you have somebody who normally in a normal course would have changed their lifestyle a little bit, now is facing some major event, and it really impacts their life very difficultly. So I guess that's my time, but thank you.
Okay, thank you, John, I appreciate it. Okay, our next guest tonight is Robert Stevens. Come on up and state your name and address for the record. Good evening. Welcome.
Robert Stevens, 92284 Whiskey Road, Warrenton. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I'm here to support the bond measure for the jail. In full disclosure, I am a Port Commissioner, Port of Astoria. I'm also on the Advisory Board, Rural Law Enforcement District for Zone 3. As retired captain with 34 years in the Coast Guard, I was in charge of law enforcement programs in Washington and Oregon. Additionally, I conducted law enforcement operations on the ocean. I learned firsthand about America's drug problem. I think somewhere around 80 to 90% of crime in our county and across the United States is related to the drug problem. We've got to consider this when we discuss putting people in jail. I learned that the successful counter-drug programs require three things: education. We got to teach young people, and we got to teach adults sometimes about the dangers of drug use. Treatment is a vital part of the counter-drug program. We've got to maintain counseling and medical treatment for drug users. But law enforcement is a vital third leg of that stool. It's vital that we have a program to apprehend, arrest, and incarcerate those who commit crime, including drug crimes. This is a public safety issue. We got to prevent people from doing harm to themselves and doing harm to others. The only way sometimes you can get a drug user clean and convince they need help is to put them in jail. Often the first steps of helping someone come when they're in jail. Incarceration, treatment, and education do not stand alone. This is not an either-or proposition. You need all three. Jail is a part of the treatment and education, and I urge you to support the jail bond measure.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, our next guest tonight is Jim Campbell. Jim, come on up, state your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Jim Campbell. I live at 92541 Pilots Road, Astoria. I am supporting the bond issue for several reasons. I'm probably one of the tightest people in the county when it comes to an increase in taxes, but I think we have to support this jail measure because we're overwhelmed, and people know if they come to Clatsop County, they're going to get turned loose within 24 hours. Because there isn't room to house them. A good example is there was a raid on Heroin Hill, which is across the road from me at Napa. And it was a big operation. 24 hours later, they were all out on the street doing business as usual. For reasons like that, I think we have to protect the public. These are dangerous people walking around doing what they do best, is dealing. And I support it because I think that we have to have protection. The public has to be protected from this sort of thing. And the only way to do it is to incarcerate it. I know we're well overcrowded at this jail. It's way outdated. And I think the most sensible thing to do is to go to the youth center, remodel it, and go the route and get an efficient jail which will actually run on less people than what we've got now. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next guest tonight is Richard Elfring. Come on up, Richard. State your name and address for the record, please. Welcome.
My name is Richard Elfring. I reside at 37730 Arbor Gate Lane in District 4. And I'm going to go a little bit against what has been brought here before, because I'm going to urge you to take another look at the jail and transforming the Oregon Youth Authority building into a full security jail. I think we do need it. You always need a jail. You're always going to have a jail. We have a jail. What the problem is in it is that it is overcrowded. We need spaces. Yes, we do. If we can take the Oregon Youth Authority building and transform it into a low-security facility, you're going to drain most of what you have in the primary jail. So they're going to go out there in low security, which will be a much cheaper remodel, because you don't have to rebuild anything. If you take, it's already a low security building. If you take that and you try to put a high security building into the middle of it, you're going to destroy whatever is there now. You can't make that transformation. But if you make it a low security facility, detention, and you can add all the other, I've written a letter, treatment facilities and everything right on into that. You have control coming from the county. It's going to be not operated, but certainly parole and probation will be there. You've got detention facility. You've got all the low, the failure to appears, the mentally ill, the drug users perhaps, but not the drug dealers. They go into the high security jail. They're headed for prison. If it's headed for prison, it goes into high security. If it's going to go for parole and probation, something on that order, it goes to low security. And then what we've got to do is do that many, many times, because it does take more than once. You've got already probably I've not been out there. It'd be nice if it was opened so we could, as a public, take a look at it. But you've already got facility for 200 people or so in a low security setting. You've already got all that facility. Don't run it by putting over the top of it a high security prison. Keep the one we have now. That is estimated to be probably under 20 people will be in high security. The majority of the jail now and the majority of the need for the jail is for a low security jail. And so I would urge you either withdraw or not, whatever. Thank you.
Our next guest is Gail Lino. Did I pronounce that right? Come on up, state your name and address.
I'm going to tell you this is my first meeting, and I'm not that prepared to say what I have to say tonight, okay?
Okay, thank you. And our final comment tonight is Mr. Brian Kidder.
Hello, Chairman Lee and Commissioners. I'm Brian Kidder, 1558 Jerome Avenue in Astoria. I'm not here to talk about the jail. I'm a candidate for the Budget Committee. And if you look at the information that was presented to you on my candidacy, I think that you'll see that I have the background to do a good job on the Budget Committee what I'd like to offer also is that I feel as though I can bring a perspective to the decision-making process that allows input from the common citizen for questions like the jail, the operation of the jail. Is the budget adequate? Is the money being spent in the right locations? So I would just ask for your support and vote for me as a representative of the 3rd District for the Budget Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, that concludes our business from the public today. Our next up is the consent calendar. I'd look for a motion for the consent calendar as presented.
I move to accept the consent calendar as presented.
So move. Second.
We have a motion to second approve the consent calendar. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Our business agenda. Our first item tonight is Budget Committee appointments, page 37. This is an item that's coming back over from last meeting. May I have the staff report, please?
Yes, there are 4 vacancies currently on the Budget Committee, Districts 1, 2, 3, and 5. One of those terms is for a full term. The other 3 terms, 2 of them expire in 2022, or I'm sorry, 2019, and one of them expires in 2020. There were a total of 8 applicants. Of those, 2 were ineligible, and I included in your packet the OAR, which states that any person who is serving on the BOPTA committee is not eligible to serve on the Budget Committee. When it's possible, it is our intention to fill any vacancies with the people who reside within that district. We have, for District 1, Andy Davis, Russ Farmer, District 2, Greg Sawyer, District 3, Brian Kidder and Robert Johnstone, and District 5, Robert Fuller. I've also included, as well as their applications, I included a breakdown that just kind of shows the years of residency as well as their relevant government experience. These are the things that when we're looking at appointing a budget committee, these are the things that we take into consideration. And so with that being said, the staff is making a recommendation that the board appoint Mr. Farmer, Mr. Sawyer, Mr. Johnstone, and Mr. Fuller to the Budget Committee as recommended.
Okay, I'm going to handle this. We can just kind of work our way through this. I guess what I'd like to first do is, since District 2 and District 5, we only have 1 applicant. I would like to bundle a motion together. I would like to entertain a motion that we appoint the District 2 and 5 seat, and then we'll have an independent discussion on District 1 and 3. So if we,
May I have a question?
please.
So I know that it's according to district, but is it required to be according to district?
It's not a requirement, it's just what we do to kind of like how Board of Commissioners have equal representation, to keep equal representation within the Budget Committee, lay Budget Committee membership as well.
Okay, so it's not a requirement.
It's not a requirement, but it seems sensible to me that each district has representation.
Okay.
So was that a motion?
No, why don't you go ahead and make a motion for 2 and 3, 2 and 5, excuse me.
Okay, so I would move that we recommend, or we appoint Mr. Sawyer and Mr. Fuller to the Budget Committee. Is that how you wanted it? 2 separate motions?
No, we can do District 2 and 5 as one motion. You've made that motion. Do we have a second?
I can second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to appoint for District 2, Greg Sawyer, and District 5, Robert Fuller. Seeing no further deliberations, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, that motion carries unanimously. Okay, now let's go up to District 1. We have Andy Davis and Russ Farmer. 2 good choices. I would like to make a motion that we appoint Andy Davis to the Budget Committee.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to appoint Andy Davis to the Budget Committee. Is there any further deliberations? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. And finally, on District 3, we have 2 choices, Brian Kidder or Robert Johnston. I'd like to thank Mr. Kidder for his words tonight. I would like to nominate, I'll make a motion to nominate Brian Kidder to the Budget Committee.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to appoint Brian Kidder to the Budget Committee. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, staff. Congratulations to the new Budget Committee. We look forward to working with you. Okay, moving on. Our next item is 6B, placing a jail bond before the voters. We're going to have a little presentation from County Manager, and then we're going to have some comments from the Sheriff.
Thank you, Chairman Lee. I thought it would be helpful just to kind of take a look back at all of the work that's been done and different options that have been explored for the jail, and kind of why we ended up with the option that we're recommending. So I'm not going to go through every one of these slides, but as you can see from this particular slide, the jail's been looked at in 2006, 2008, 2012, 2017. This is not a new issue. It's been looked at many times over the years. This is, I think Mr. McCartan had asked a question earlier about the $12 million option, and that's what this is. This utilizes basically only the existing Oregon Youth Authority facility, and it's $12 million to construct, but it is terribly expensive to operate. And if we went into this facility, at least this way, A, we get fewer beds. We'd end up with about 140 beds. More importantly, sometime in the next few years, we'd probably be at a point where we couldn't fully operate this because of the cost. And I'm not going to get into that part. But then we started looking at more modern options that may be more costly to build, but they're also much less expensive to operate. So we looked at a variety of options from 200 beds down to about 120 beds. This happens to be a 200-bed option, and that's a close-up of it. This is the slide I wanted to show. This is why using the OIA facility the way it is much more costly from a staff standpoint. You can see from the dots that are up there, these are places where you would have to pay full-time staff, 24/7, 365 days a year to be there. And you can see, if you look at the option on the left, there's just a lot more cost involved in that. And again, unfortunately, I think if we went that option somewhere down the road the next few years, the county would be at a point of saying, we can't really afford to operate this thing. In other words, it's not very efficient in terms of operation. That's part of what you gain with the additional construction cost, is you gain a much more efficient operation. And over a long period of time, it's actually cheaper. This gets into some of the different staffing comparisons. But this gives you some idea. You're talking about lots of money here. When we talk about a difference in operation costs, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. So that's part of the reason, the main reason, why we moved away from the $12 million construction was because the operating costs would really kill us. These are not real pretty, but we didn't want to spend tons of money with our architecture firm. But I just wanted to put these up to give you an idea. We looked at lots of different options here, and we said, don't do really detailed, expensive cost estimates and architectural drawings. Just give us some ideas here of how these things might work. So this was a 200-bed option. This was a 120-bed option that we looked at. This is the 148-bed option, which is really ultimately the one that we'll be recommending tonight. And the other, well, I'll get to another slide on this in a minute. This is a 136-bed option. So we looked at lots of different ways to try to do this. And that's really the point of putting these up here. So let me just... So this is basically where we are after months. I don't know, we started talking about this last summer. And through about January of this year, looking at all those options, looking at both the construction costs, but also the operating costs, and the need for beds that were identified in those previous jail studies, I think we all came to the conclusion that this is probably the most cost-effective option for the county. So this gets us to 148 beds from the current 60 that we have at the jail. So it's not the 200-bed option, it's not 180, it's about 148 beds. As you can see, it utilizes about half of the current OYA facility, so we're making use of that. And also, if you think back to a couple of those other options I showed you, and particularly if you're looking at the new construction inside the rectangle, you can see there's basically 4 pods there. They're triangular, those triangular pods. This design would allow us to add additional pods to this in the future fairly cost effectively if that need arose. If you go into the old OYA facility, I'm not quite sure how you'd add on to that, but it'd be pretty expensive. So this is basically where we're at, what we're recommending. You've all seen this before, so the construction costs on this one are estimated at over $17 million. Once you start throwing in, there's lots of soft costs, hard costs. The soft costs, there's a lot of those that we would need to pay. There's lots of experts, architects, geotechnical, lots of different things you have to pay for. They're coming up with a number of about $23.8 million. What we're suggesting is that the county could provide about $3 million in cash that we have saved for projects like this, frankly, and probably go out and look at about a $20 million jail bond. And, I think that gets this project done. That gives you a sense of the operations. You can see much more operationally efficient. And just as a rule of thumb, each of those dots, each person you see on there, when you take into account the cost of benefits, salaries, all that, each person you add to this is probably about $120,000 a year. Once you throw in all the costs, to have a $100,000 to $120,000. So each time you add a person, you're adding at least $100,000 to your annual operating costs. And that is basically it. Again, I thought it'd be good to get some perspective about where we've been and where we've come from. Certainly, I'm sure Sheriff Bergen has a few comments he'd like to make.
No, no, thank you. Thank you, Chair Lee and Commissioners. We only need to look to Multnomah County when they opened up, or tried to open up a jail, and they didn't have the personnel to run it. So when Mr. Elfring has an idea, but the problem is when we looked at it, we're not only increasing our work staff, it's easy to build the place. And we also in that $20 million number, there's quite a huge contingency built into that too, a couple $1 million, which hopefully we could still keep that out of the equation. But back to when you start adding up these people, it's easy to build a jail, but it's not easy to maintain, or easy to build anything, but it's not easy to maintain the personnel workforce. It's year after year after year with increasing costs in that area. So anyway, so it's difficult when you start working at that angle, looking at that angle. Also, when you look at bifurcating your workforce, parole and probation is already with the sheriff's office, and this being right next door to the sheriff's office is going to make it a lot more efficient as well, and making it where we can basically go back and forth between the two buildings. Again, like I said last week or last month, we're recycling a building. I think it's a good use for this building. Hopefully the state will be able to look at us as well and kick some additional money in. I've also reached out to the PSCC, and they wrote a letter in complete support. I won't read the whole thing, but it's 2 pages, basically saying that they do support this 148-bed facility where it is to ensure dangerous offenders are held pending trial, which we don't do currently. It's very, very rare. So the jail is an integral part of this community. I think it was Mr. McCartan's touch that we didn't, our community has not increased at all. that he's very right about that, but the problem is our crime rate has increased immensely. We're either number 1 or number 2 or number 3 in the state for crimes per capita because everybody from Seattle, Tacoma, Vancouver, Portland, Salem, and Eugene come to where? They come to Seaside and Astoria. So we have a huge amount of people that come to our county that are not held accountable. Also, so the PSCC, which is staffed by Chief Skirmerhorn from Cannon Beach, myself, Josh Markey, Chief Joey Daniels, City of Seaside Fire Department, Commissioner Rick Newton, City of Warrenton, Commissioner Sarah Nebeker, and then Lieutenant Kristen Hanthorn from Parole and Probation, Andrew Marilla from the State Police, Director Michael McNichol, Public Health, Director Greg Ingebretson, Juvenile Department, Director Amy Baker of Clatsop Behavioral, and then Superintendent James Sapper, Oregon Youth Authority, all signed on to the lip sync, or the PSCC as we call it here in Clatsop County, in support of a jail. Also the judges, with presiding judge Paula Brownhill wrote a letter saying that they also support the concept of a new jail. And I'll submit those to the staff if you so desire. So basically, we're asking you to put this on the ballot for the voters to decide, and we'll see where it goes. And I will have as they say, a big show out there, and we will try to gather and gain as much support as we can to make sure that our community is held safe and kept safe. And as Sheriff Reichel also commented, this is about holding people accountable, but it's also about keeping people safe. And then treatment, we can, we'll have room for more treatment and more mental health and all those things that come with the jail that currently that we're held accountable for. So that's really all I have left to say, unless you have any questions.
And do you have any questions for the staff?
I do have questions. Can we go back to what you just said about the mental health, and can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. Over the years, in the late 80s, the Wilsonville shut down where Damish was, or Damish shut down, which was in Wilsonville. And the state decided to try to do some different ideas with how to manage mentally ill people. Mm-hmm. And originally back then, they would go to a state mental hospital, they'd get treatment, and then we try to incorporate them back into the communities and so on. They changed that whole aspect in the late 80s and said, we're going to put small homes, group homes in different communities. That didn't even last 2 years because everybody said, not in my neighborhood. And basically what you had was 8 to 10 people, sometimes 12, sometimes 5, walking around neighborhoods and upsetting all kinds of the neighborhoods. So that kind of went by the wayside. Then over the years, everything just kind of folded in with less and less mental health, wellness towards those people. And so it fell onto the people to the jail to basically take care of these individuals. And unfortunately, that's not where they need to be. They decompensate, and it's just a huge problem. But we've taken steps at our jail to manage and bring in mental health counselors. We've brought in doctors that deal with this, and we try to get them as much help as we can. We work with Clatsop Behavioral. We work with the different agencies now. Instead of just shutting them out, we try to work with the hospitals. It's been difficult at times, but we are managing that. When you have a jail that has the ability to have the right capacity, then we can get people stabilized quicker and make sure that they're on a path to going to the place where they need to be, instead of in, out, in, out, in, out. I mean, sometimes we have 4,000 or 5,000 bookings a year, and that's not a way to get people healthy. It's not good. And currently also our rooms, we don't have any safe rooms at this jail, at the old jail, and this additional place would have more of an environment conducive to that type of individual.
So are you saying that if people that perhaps are dealing with mental health issues, if they're able to remain in jail longer, they can get stabilized?
No, just instead of the revolving door, mm-hmm. we can get them to help quicker, and we can have the doctor and the rooms that are built for this to get them, not treatment, but get them to the place where they can get treatment, where they can be analyzed at the jail and then realize, okay, look at this person needs to go here. So.
Yeah, sometimes what happens is people are in and out of the jail before the mental health professionals can connect with them, and once they get back out on the street, they have a hard time finding these folks.
Right, I didn't make myself clear, but, so when they get in, it's that possibility that they're going to be seen is increased immensely.
And you're having psychiatrists or video working with the jail? How is that working?
It depends. We have different ways of having individuals looked at. Clatsop Behavioral, we take them to the hospital, we do all kinds of different things. But the problem is, if their crime is low, they're going to be matrixed out the door before they're even seen.
So you expect with a larger jail, you'll be able to hold on to them longer?
Correct.
And then
Get them the
routed
appropriate
to
help where they need to go.
help.
Exactly.
Okay, 'cause one of my big concerns, and it has been since I've been on the commission that I have talked about, is the medical costs. That if they're in the jail longer, then the county takes over more of the responsibility for their medical costs. And we talked at the last meeting when you were here, Sheriff, about, we've got a wonderful thing going on now with the county doctors, but when that changes, so are we, that for me that's one of the issues is the medical costs and the operational costs.
Right.
And like you said, it's easy to build a jail, but how do you keep it open?
Right. Well, and that's why we are always, like I said last time, we're always forecasting out. We're very conservative with our budgets. We maintain I think, one of the tightest budgets there is in the county. We're always looking forward through attrition. If we have to remove a position, we don't just fire somebody. We do it through attrition, usually through the next budget, because there's enough turnover working in this type of environment. But it's something that this community is really going to have to sit down and look at, whether we're still here or if we're over there. Because whether or not we like it or not, the two doctors we've been very blessed to have that type of medical staff, and at $1,400 a month or whatever per doctor, it's just unheard of. I mean, we're known all over the state for being probably one of the luckiest facilities, but it's part of the law, it's part of human nature, it's our moral obligation, it's our obligation to take care of these individuals, and so it's just part of doing business. And whether you have a 60-bed jail or 140-bed jail, it's going to be part of the cost of doing business.
So when they were, in the presentation, I'm not sure if I understood this right, the $120,000 per person, that's with each additional staff or staff of law enforcement, it's with all expenses, it's about $120,000 per person. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, I think it's a little less than that, but they're talking FICA and retirement,
Right.
and vehicles and everything else that goes with an individual uniform.
Which is fine, because it all
uniforms.
comes out of the county, but
Well,
how many-
not
how
all,
many-
some of it comes out of rural law enforcement district, which
I
supplants
mean,
the.
it's all taxpayer dollars.
Correct,
From this pot
absolutely.
or that pot, it's all
Correct.
taxpayer
And so if we
dollars.
did go the 12 million version, and we're going to have 8 people on the floor instead of 5, or 7 in one scenario and 4 and 7 and 5, those costs add up over the years, and it's an immense expense.
So are those dots, is that one person, or
That's
is it
one.
just one area where you have the staff?
It's one person in that area, except for the green, that's a rover that would be moving around throughout. County managers there you go.
So this,
But
You got to remember, those are stationary positions where they're sitting there watching inmates and/or, go ahead if you want something.
it's also a 24/7 operation.
Right.
So this isn't, one person there from 8 to 5. This is one person there
around the clock.
around the clock, so it's 3 people, really.
Right.
But still, that doesn't seem like very many people for,
Well, but if you actually, and the one on the left, or yes, it'd be your left, actually, we could actually put about 2 more people in there for safety and security. We parted it down to try to get to where it was still safe and still within legal parameters, so to speak, for working conditions. And we pared that down to get it to 8 or 7, excuse me. And then the other one at 5, that's about legitimate there. So, but yet, like, you have to remember what the county manager said. That's just not 1 dot. That's technically 3 dots per every 24 hours. So that adds up immensely when you start, doing the math.
So that's like 360 per dot.
Kind of, yes.
Okay. I like what you said about the sheriff, because the sheriff's department is so close that you can run from there to the jail. But what about transporting these individuals to the courthouse?
Court. Yeah, we've taken that into consideration, and there would be, when we put this all together, we have those additional employees that we've looked at having to hire, 2 or 3, 4 maybe. It depends on, which scenario we go with, that, one of those people will be involved with transportation. Tillamook County is a perfect example. Their courthouse is further away than ours is actually at this distance. So it's something that somebody does that. We have people that do it currently right now, because it's just the only difference is they're putting them in a vehicle and driving them over instead of walking them over. So it's
Then you'll be holding them where when they get over to this side? There must be some place where
Commissioner's office. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm sure Mr. Moore won't mind that.
No, there's plenty of holding areas in the courthouse and things like that we can utilize.
Then I guess on the thing here, is this a typo? That
If I wrote it, yes.
Reduction of special projects fund reserves up to $3 million and increased annual jail operating costs of approximately $150,000. What does that $150,000, is that in addition to the $3 million? Or is that a typo and that should be $1.5 million?
No, you're kind of talking about two different things. The 20 million would be the capital cost to build the jail.
Right.
150,000 would be an annual increase in operating costs for the new jail.
So we go from 60 beds to 148 beds, it's only a $150,000 increase?
Well, it's a much more efficient design than what we have now.
Yep.
You'd have to look at the efficiency level. Also, just real quick to touch on this, I'm sorry, go ahead if you have a question.
No, that seems really amazing to me.
Well, that's what we do, why we do what we do. We utilize people that understand jails. We utilize people that understand how to build them. We utilized people that understand numbers. And so we've tried to work this over the last year because we learned from the last 2, just like the college did. We can't go out and build this grandiose building and utilize all these brand new employees and spend millions of dollars every year to run this. But we also need to keep our community safe. And by doing so, if we look at this in a responsible way, I really feel that this will work for this community. And then in the future, the next sheriff, 20 years from now isn't going to be using my name in vain going, what the hell did he do this to me for, And I'm not going to use any other sheriff's names in vain, but especially not John. He's done the right thing. But, way back when this place was built for 29 individuals across the street and we double bunked to 58, almost immediately it was ludicrous to even think so.
So the $150,000 is in addition to the amount of money that you're spending.
Correct.
That cost would just be transferred out
Correct.
there with an additional $150,000.
Correct.
So what is the $3 million? Where does that, because you, Chairman Moore, you said that I had that kind of mixed up. Could you explain a little bit more about that $3 million?
Yeah, the $3 million, this would be cash that the county would put into the construction cost, the capital cost, to come down from that 23 million down to a jail bond of 20 million. So this is, these are funds that the county, has set aside over the years to meet both our goals for having adequate reserves, but also knowing that at some point in the future, every year, we know at some point in the future, we're going to have to spend significant money on some county facility at some point in the future. So we try to put money aside for that. So this is money basically that the county has, in the bank now, if you will, that as opposed to going for a $23 million bond issue, we think we can bring that down to 20, utilize the $3 million that we have available to us now, not ask the taxpayers to have to pass a bond of $23 million.
A real good example of that, Commissioner, is the courthouse, when we did the remodel courthouse. When you do special projects, we've already collected tax money from the money for taxes from individuals. So they bank it, they utilize it, they make more money. And then when there is a special project, such as the courthouse remodel or the 800 Exchange remodel, when they took that building and made it for offices for all the county businesses and so on, and the commissioner's office, those were special projects. This would also be, which would lessen the load to taxpayers in the community. And just one last little thing, it was mentioned that if we went with this other vision for low offenders, we don't really keep low offenders in jail. I mean, that's just kind of a fallacy. We really only keep the worst of the worst anymore because, I mean, even if you look at, it's nice to be able to hold people accountable, let's granted that, but heroin now is a misdemeanor possession. Methamphetamine possession is a misdemeanor. So a lot of these things are not going to be held. We're going to be holding the warrants and holding people accountable and then getting, the help that people need, like Commissioner Stevens spoke about too. So
this $3 million, that's out of that special projects funds. Is that the same fund that if we have another 2008 and the world is on the brink of economic collapse and we're trying to keep our county government going, and that's what the reserves are for? Is this a separate fund from that?
Well, it probably would be a combination. We do have a special projects fund, again, where we're looking at in the future, we're going to have to spend a lot of money on facilities, so let's plan and save for that. We also have financial reserves that the county keeps, and I think you got the report several months ago from our long-term financial plan consultant that we try to keep about 3 months or so of what the county's operating our operating costs would be. We try to keep that in reserve. So it would be a combination of special projects funds, probably some would come out of the reserve. We would then start to look at how do we build that reserve back up to the level that it's at now. So, it's a decision we would make to spend money now, but it also requires us to do some budgeting in the future to make sure that, we get our reserves back up to an adequate level.
Because doesn't that, a lot of that special project fund, doesn't that come from timber revenue?
A lot of it does.
Very boom and bust cycle. We're currently in a boom cycle, but we all know that the bust is right on the corner.
Yeah, we use, we're fortunate that we have the timber money, and those are some smart decisions made years ago in the county that we don't use much. We do use a little bit, but we don't use a lot of timber money to fund day-to-day operations of the county. We rely on the tax revenues that come in and year out. And we tend to spend those money on projects like this, special projects, large amount of money, one-time expense.
I feel a little uneasy about that. Do you feel that to add another $3 million on the bond, and I want to talk a little bit, if we may, about the bond from what I've heard in the community, is that, because when we first started talking about this, I hadn't heard about the Warrenton schools wanting a bond and the Astoria schools wanting a bond, and there is a lot of money being asked of the communities right now, the library, the infrastructure on the docks. And so I'm a little concerned about that, and I just want to know what you all think about that. I mean, if we're coming up on 3 bonds in the fall, this is the right time for this.
One of those bonds is going to come up earlier, but I guess my statement to you would be then let the voters decide that. And that's your decision to put this on the ballot, and let me go out and talk to the people and explain to them all the importance of a jail. And like Josh Markey stated, it's not sexy, and so did Sheriff Reichel. It's not a sexy thing, but it's a necessary thing. And if we don't have some accountability and some safety for this community, then pretty soon, you can build all the schools you want, but are the kids going to be safe? If they're, we've got people running up down these streets every day that we're releasing that shouldn't be released. But I'm asking the commission to look at putting this on the ballot for November, not to make a decision about building it, but to allow the people to make that decision, and that's what we're here for.
And I hear you say, I hear you with that, and So if I may go back a little bit to the 3 million, so that's anticipated to be a one-time withdrawal from the special projects?
Correct.
Not to have to continue to withdraw it for operation costs?
Correct.
And you feel pretty confident that, that this is the time to get this passed?
Correct.
Do you feel?
I do feel, you know, I don't like bringing this up because he was a close friend of mine, but I firmly believe that Jason Gooding would still be alive today if we had a jail that was adequate to hold people like, I'm not even going to use his name, in jail, which he should have been in jail, but we'd released him several times, many times. And I'm involved heavily with the community. I go to every meeting that there ever was, it seems like. And every time I go into a room, they're like, hey, I hear you're thinking about building a new jail, recycling the old building. That's a great idea. And I'm sorry I didn't vote for it last time because I firmly believe Jason would still be alive if we'd had that guy in jail. And so I think there's a push right now, and schools are great. We just passed a big one in Seaside. But you know, Warrenton, I don't know where that's going to go. They say 33 right now, but when you really look at what they're forecasting, it's about double or maybe even a little bit more than that. So there's a lot of things in there, but I'm asking you as a commissioner to let the voters decide and let me and my staff go out and work our tails off to try to get this passed. And so it's up to you to be able to put it on the ballot, and that's all I'm asking.
Well, I read the letter that, from the Public Safety Coordinating Council, and I respect all the people on this letter. I mean, I respect the work that you've done on this. I think it's a difficult question, though. It's not an easy question.
I know. We've been here.
I wish it were a slam dunk, but I don't.
Nothing
think
in life's a slam dunk,
I have
so.
a few things to add here.
Sure.
Okay, so to me, this is a very simple question, and it's a question that we need to do this. I've been, one of my first speeches I ever gave before I was a county commissioner and running an election is I pointed out the fact that we needed to build a new jail, and that was 9 years ago. And so here we are today, and I would like to congratulate staff and everybody that's worked really hard to bring, in my mind, one of the best scenarios here. And we've studied this for months or years, and this is a really good plan. And I think one of the most important pieces of this is the operation costs continuing down the road. And that was one of my main concerns. We've worked really hard at bringing this into perspective. This is a great proposal, and I think the citizens will have the final say. And I'm going to work really hard to, you know, if we can push this through tonight, I'm going to work really hard for the next, 6 months or so to get this passed. And I really appreciate, and I want to the sheriff's behind this, and a lot of members of the community, and so this is something I really support.
Thank you, Chair Lee.
Yeah, I think nobody wants to spend more money. You know, we all like to save, nobody wants to pay more taxes, but I have to agree that I think this is a good time because everyone in this nation has been aware of substance abuse epidemic, the opioid epidemic, and even though it's not a jailable offense, we know that these people break the law. And this will allow people to help people to get the help that they need. It will give them more of an opportunity. And I really think that this part of this bond needs to be, this portion needs to be really communicated well to the public. Because I think it's in our awareness now. It's across the nation and it's in our county. So I'm very supportive of this, and I'd like to make a motion.
I'm sorry. I have a couple more questions.
Go ahead.
Well, I see that two of our colleagues are not here. Is that a concern for anyone, that there's only 3 sitting up here?
No, not for me.
So we've
got a quorum.
Okay.
And would you like to make a motion?
Yes. I move to direct and authorize the county manager to bring forward a resolution and ballot measure placing a $20 million jail bond on the November 2018 general election ballot.
So we have a motion?
Can we discuss the motion? It has to be seconded. We second it and then discuss it?
Deliberate after the...
Okay, I'll second it. I'd like to discuss it after we
We have a
second it.
motion and a second. Is there any further deliberations?
Yes. One, I think that when you go out to sell this bond, I would make the suggestion to really help the citizens understand about the value of this and means of the operation costs. Because that's what I have heard as I've talked about this, because we've been talking about this for a year. And one of the things that keeps coming up is operations costs. And so I still have some concerns, but I will defer to the voters of Clatsop County.
Thank you. And we really worked hard to get those.
I know you did. It's a
Immensely.
very complex question and situation. As you know, you've been working on it for how many years?
Myself, 16.
Yeah. So it's not, I know
As
it's not
sheriff
easy.
for 14. So
I just don't think we should, it just need to keep
As
everything in
and
consideration.
Donald Sutherland said in Kelly's Heroes, stop the negative vibes, man. No, I'm sorry. I'm just having some fun with it.
That's one of the
So
better ones you've to come up with.
I love that commercial. I mean that movie. I'm sorry. So thank you.
We have a motion and a second on the table. Or, is there any further deliberations? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations, thank you. And again,
Thank you.
we all need to work together to get this bond passed. And
And one last thing, Chair Lee, I've offered this forever and ever, and I've always done it, and either I do it or the staff does it, but anybody in this community is welcome to come do a tour of this current facility, and if they want to look at the new facility and how we can lay it out, we'd be more than happy. We're also going to have a pack put together now that you've decided this way, and there are several members in the community on both sides of the fence, political sides, that are willing to help with this. So thank you very much, and I appreciate all of your time.
I would hope that as many people as possible could tour the current jail. I think they would be persuaded.
Well, we get about
overwhelmingly.
4,500 to 5,000 touring that jail yearly anyway, but I'm sure, yes, we will do it.
Not by choice.
Yes. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you.
Commissioner. Okay, now we're going to move on to our final item on the business agenda, and this is part of the amended agenda. This is the cancellation of delinquent personal property, manufactured structure taxes. And I had a chance to look over this. It's fairly straightforward. Can I have the staff report, please?
Sure. So I'm here to ask you to approve of this one page of delinquent personal property that we've deemed wholly uncollectible under the statute. So if you want any more detail or you have some questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Yeah, you might have a couple questions because this is the first time you've seen one of these before, and I apologize for it getting late on the agenda. Fairly straightforward.
It's an annual thing that we do, and it's accounts that we've exhausted all other efforts to
I remember this from
collect.
last year, yeah.
Mhm. So there's, as you'll note on here, there's bankruptcy, there's abandonment. There's one, the very first one is the seizure of a manufactured structure, and that's the manufactured structure that will be going up for a public auction on the 27th, so.
Seeing any more questions for staff, I'd look for a motion.
I move to approve the cancellation of those delinquent personal property accounts deemed uncollectible as defined by ORS 311.790.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the cancellation of these delinquent personal property accounts deemed uncollectible as defined by ORS 311-790. Seeing no further deliberations, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, staff. Okay, that concludes our business agenda, and now we're going to move to commissioners' reports. Commissioner Nebaker.
Well, I have not attended any other meetings, as because I had the flu. I am going to attend the meeting, the all-day meeting this Friday here at the Boynton Building, the sequential intercept mapping and taking action for change. And that's all I have.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Yes, I'm also going to attend that meeting this Friday. It looks very interesting. I'll also be going to the CASA fundraiser dinner tomorrow night at the Bridgewater Bistro. And I attended the Board of Forestry meeting March 7th in Salem and spoke during the public comments period, expressing our desire for a balanced forest plan and the fact that the FTLIC meetings have been canceled. I think the one in April is going to go, but they've been canceled due to the concern about speaking about the forest management plan because of the Lynn County lawsuit. And so as a result of that, there is no report going directly from the FTLIC to the Board of Forestry. And I talked about my concern about that, and the Board of Forestry asked me if Clatsop County would be willing to speak to them on the forest management plan, and I told them anytime, any place. Commissioner John Sweet from Coos County also spoke during the public public comments, saying that, basically saying what I just said, and that they have been canceling the FTLIC meetings because they have been directed by their attorney, John DiLorenzo, that if they say comments that may hurt their case, it's better to just not say anything. And they appealed that to the Oregon Department of Justice, asking if they could have some kind of special waiver. I'm not sure how to say it, I don't have it in front of me, but my recollection of what he said was that the Oregon Department of Justice said, well, our recommendation is that you drop the Lynn County lawsuit. And they are, so both sides are back and they're on their sides. One side is going ahead and one side is defending. So that is, I imagine that's going to continue for years to come. And we'll see what happens. But I think it's important that our voice is heard, that we believe in a balanced forest management plan. And particularly with the listing of the marbled murrelets, that adds another endangered species, and that adds another layer of concern when they're deciding in the forest management plan. Liz Dent, the Deputy Chief Forester of the state, I probably don't have that right either, but she gave her report, and Clatsop Forester Ty Williams was down there. Also, he gave part of the report. And they talked about we having, the last couple of years have had record harvest at record market rates. In fact, what happens is generally the Department of Forestry gives someone who purchases a lot to harvest, they have up to 3 years to harvest it. And they wait for the best market prices generally. And so it can be 3 years before we see the revenue from that particular lot that's been sold. But lately, people have been selling their lot. They've been buying the lot and harvesting it almost within the first year. So one of the Board of Forestry members asked, what's going to happen when, is there going to be a time where there's a gap because the money is all coming in now and not the expected 2 or 3 years down the line? So it's a very complex thing that's going on, and I enjoy going down to the meetings and enjoy listening and learning, and I will bring back the reports to you all. Saturday, I'm going down to the Tillamook Forestry Center and speaking on a panel for the Lewis and Clark Environmental Studies class. They are now going on field trips, and Rex Storm will be the other panelist. So that'll be Saturday. I'm looking forward to that. During the Board of Forestry, they gave out, each year they give out the Operators of the Year Award. And this year, the criteria is consistency, difficulty, results, innovation and extra effort, financial risk to the operator. And the merit awards go to Zuber and Sons Logging in Gold Beach, Lane Perry Forestry Consulting Incorporated Eastern Operator of the Year, and this may look familiar to you, Morrissey Logging Incorporated Northwest Operator of the Year, Jamie Hilliard, and then Denali Logging Incorporated Southern Operator of the Year. And they all received a plaque, and congratulations for the good work that they did. So I think one of the things that I always stress when I go to the Board of Forestry is that Clatsop County believes in a forest plan that doesn't, a balanced forest plan. That doesn't mean that we don't believe in harvesting. We're well aware of the income that we get from forestry and the jobs that are provided by the logging companies in this community. So, but my concern is that it is a boom and bust cycle, and we're currently in the boom. So we need to be aware that things change. And I think that's all that I had for today. Seems like there's, I guess that's it for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your work on forestry. It's very important. I've been on vacation, so I have nothing to add. There was a Northwest Oregon Housing Authority meeting that just went fine. There's been no new developments. And so with that, I'll turn it over to the county manager.
Thank you. Just update on a couple of things. I mentioned this at previous meetings, obviously, but we've been working with 5 cities in the county to find a consultant to help us with the countywide housing study. So we kind of put the solicitation out. We got a number of firms that did respond. The committee met twice, actually, to review those, and then we actually did some Skype interviews with the firms and had some discussion with them. And so I think the committee has made a selection on a firm to do that, and I'm thinking that sometime here in the next couple of weeks we'll have a contract from that firm, and we'll get ready to go on that. That work will probably be a 4 to 6 month process. So, it's going to take a little while, but when they get to the end of that, we'll know more about our housing market in Clatsop County than anybody has probably ever known. And along with that, we'll have some recommendations as to how we address future housing needs. I'm guessing that means we'll have to do some things different than what we've done in the past. But so it's good to get to that point. The committee was actually great to work with. We had one representative from each of the entities that are funding it. And we were actually able to come to a pretty unanimous agreement about which firm we thought would do the best job for us. So a couple of other things just quickly. I've mentioned this in the past, but today actually we began negotiations on our AFSCME contract. AFSCME is the largest county union. They represent roughly 100 county employees. And so today was the beginning of that. It was a very good beginning, and I think both sides are committed to getting contract negotiations completed by June 30th, which is when the current contract expires. Also just mention, I know you all know we're in budget process, but our budget and finance director, Monica Steele, and I finished the first round of meetings with each department looking at their budgets for next year and budget request. There's a number of other meetings that come after that. But we're making good progress on that, and we should have a budget ready to release for public view here down the road, not too far. And then I also would just mention, you also know we've been involved in a search for a new human resource director. We had a round of phone interviews with candidates a couple weeks ago. We had candidates in for personal interviews last week. Had a second round of follow-up phone interviews with some finalist candidates the last couple of days. And I'm hoping, possibly we might have an offer out to a new HR director by the end of this week. So we're moving along on that too, and it's a position that's been vacant for a bit, and it's an important position, so we want to get it filled. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Very good. Is there anything else? Well, thank you, everybody. Have a great evening, and the meeting's adjourned.